Thank you, Katie, and good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and a special thanks for the Minister. Labour government's been in for 9 months now, I think it is, and in that time we've had a lot of, as the Minister mentioned, a lot of discussion, a lot of dialogue, not just on this issue, but others as well. And it is, I think what the industry would say is that the government is absolutely listening. Some of the things that they've inherited, they clearly have to be managed, but it is important to listen and to hear what the industry, not just this industry, but other industries, not just about the transition and so forth, what we are saying, because, as I'll talk about in a moment, the challenges are really intense. And I think what we need to do, and what I want to talk about over the next couple of minutes or so, is the importance of that collaborative, collective action. So, ladies and gentlemen, since the inception of the family car, things have changed radically. Interiors, exteriors, connectivity, propulsion systems. But as I address you today, some of the questions from the back seat seem eternal. Are we there yet? Shouldn't we just have turned back there? Can we stop for a McDonald's? And that despite my kids being in their 20s. Apparently they have, like me, a love of chocolate milkshakes. It's a genetic characteristic, who knew? However, we are living in a time when no one has all the answers. Certainty is in short supply. Historic alliances, once solid, appear fluid. Friends, historic friends, sometimes sounding like foes. Short-termism replacing future thinking, backtracking. Well, let me, on behalf of the UK automotive industry, buck that trend and offer some certainty. We are and remain committed to net zero. The decision made in boardroom some years ago to transform our industry and decarbonise transportation have not changed. But we have to acknowledge that the road conditions, since we first planned our route, even if the destination, without question, remains the same, have changed. Now, I urge everyone who wants to achieve net zero and who would not, we must stick together. No industry, sector or stakeholder, including government, can deliver this alone. The UK automotive industry has done and is continuing to play its part, collectively committing over £20 billion to develop and bring to the UK world-leading EV technologies. In the last 5 years alone, we have put 1.3 million EVs on the road, just shy of 400,000 last year. That's a tenfold increase in just 5 years. There's about 130 models available, the variety growing every day, the range improving every day to over about 300 miles now. I cannot see what part of the UK automotive industry's record can reasonably be described as reluctant. It has, in fact, been pioneering. We all know the destination, but the road is proving rockier than we and many policymakers expected. Now, believe me, we want to get there as quickly as we can, because that is the future of our industry and the key to the prosperity of this country. In fact, it's more than just prosperity. As the Committee on Climate Change made clear in their 7th carbon budget a couple of weeks ago, this transition is fundamental not just to the prosperity of the country, but also to our resilience and our security. Now, we applaud their ambition and share their determination, but realising their vision and the importance of this sector does depend on some critical assumptions. First of all, that electricity will become cheaper, but also that EVs as cost competitive as ICE cars, both of these things to happen in the next couple of years. I hope that's true, but frankly, I think we remain a very long way from both. So we do need to pick up the pace, despite how strong it has been over the past couple of years. Otherwise, other markets, China, the EU, will power ahead, even potentially, as we read, the USA may be backtracking. There are two issues here, incentives and disincentives. As I said, progress has been phenomenal, a tenfold increase in 5 years. But the fact remains that consumers, especially private consumers, are not buying EVs in sufficient numbers to meet our ambitious and collective targets. Our industries had to discount heavily to encourage demand. Manufacturers spent, as you know, £4.5 billion on incentives in the UK last year alone. £4.5 billion. To put that into context, that is the equivalent of a third of the UK's entire overseas aid budget before it was cut. Now, as someone keen on cutting government spending on the other side of Atlantic might say, let that sink in. Such spend is, however, unsustainable. But what about the disincentives I mentioned? We have to accept that the ZEV mandate has turned out to be a road paved with good intentions, but has not yet taken us to where we need to be. Back when it was drawn up, the roadmap was perhaps clearer. Energy prices were lower, raw material and production costs were improving, money was cheaper, there was higher organic demand for these types of vehicles. Then the unforeseen and perhaps the unforeseeable roadblocks appeared. The war in Ukraine, escalating energy prices, rampant inflation, consumer confidence constrained. The course of history has probably changed. The route to our destination has definitely changed. So we now face a situation where without government incentives, consumer demand, private consumer demand for EVs is weak. It is further weakened by perhaps Treasury disincentives. As you've just heard, the vehicle excise duty expensive car supplement, which comes into force next month, will penalise consumers for doing the very things we want them to do. There's proposals to end employee car ownership schemes, which will penalise our own industry's working people, further undermining profitability and cutting off supply to the used car market just when we need it most. And of course, manufacturers are being punished because there are not enough drivers wanting to buy those EVs. So the consequences are becoming apparent. Sales overall flat, production down, plants closed, jobs lost, and investment postponed because the state of the market and the state of manufacturing are indivisible. It's economic decline where there should be and could be growth. Revisiting the mandate is not about abandoning it. It's not about watering it down. It's to try and fix something that currently is not working as well as it could. The industry has submitted its proposals, a position we hope is viewed as constructive and that will help deliver the outcome we all need. But in a depressingly familiar refrain, we need everyone to play their part to break down all those barriers. And charging and the perception of charging remains one of the biggest barriers. The survey of new car buyers, which we're publishing today, reveals that that issue is the biggest barrier to adoption. Consumers will simply not buy EVs if they cannot conveniently charge them, as you heard the Minister said. Now, we are seeing infrastructure expand, up by more than a third last year. This is good news. This is absolutely what we need. But the increase is just about keeping pace with the EV rollout. And I've been talking about how successful that has been. Unfortunately, today, there is still only one public charge point for every 28 plug-in cars on the road. That's unchanged from a year ago. And the regional variations are stark, ranging from one charger for every 10 cars in London to one for every 57 in the northwest. And if you can find a charge point, it can readily cost you somewhere between 3 to 10 times more than charging at home, as we just heard from some of the questions. That can work out to be up to 60% more expensive than refueling with petrol or diesel for the same range. Yet some investors in charging infrastructure have said that they should hold back until more vehicles are bought. Now, our industry knows only too well it doesn't work that way. Vehicle manufacturers invested in EVs as loss leaders, invested ahead of demand, invested to stimulate demand. The industry put its money where its mouth is, but consumers will only buy EVs if they have the confidence in the infrastructure, if it is ready, easy and affordable, as easy as refueling. Then they will buy the vehicles from us in greater numbers, and they will buy their energy from the charge point providers in greater numbers. So we ask the charge point industry, the energy providers, match our investment. Challenge yourselves whether you can do more to create a virtuous circle of growing demand with us. It is, after all, a partnership, even if it is perhaps an unintended one. So in a world of doubt, there is no need to doubt the UK automotive industry's commitment to a net zero economy. Our future depends on it. Other sectors, other countries may waver, may U-turn, we have not. Those who refer to us as a legacy industry betray their own legacy thinking. Net zero is not a matter of protest, it is a matter of necessity, and one which the UK automotive industry is making a reality. Net zero is an opportunity we have grasped and want to exploit it to its fullest. As the Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, net zero is the industrial opportunity of this 21st century. And there is no trade-off between economic growth and net zero. Quite the opposite. We don't just agree, we have staked the industry's future on it. But at this moment, government, indeed all that have a stake in this transition, need to come closer together to act in concert, because we must move the market even faster. Last year, overall registrations by private buyers, those without the salary sacrifice, dropped to 750,000, the lowest since lockdown and the darkest days of the pandemic. The overall market is constrained. 5 months of incremental decline we've seen. The consumers are sitting on their hands, unsure of which technology to buy. Unfortunately, potentially unsure about which technology might be demonized next. So the vehicle park ages and decarbonisation is held back. So we need something to change for consumers to embrace these new technologies. Now, I don't share Donald Trump's love of tariffs, but I can share with him some thoughts on VAT. A 50% cut on VAT on new EVs would see, we believe, an uplift of about 15% of new EV registrations, 2 million over the next 3 years. That would be groundbreaking uplift for all of us. From charge point providers to energy companies, supply chain insurers, service and repair, every sector with a stake in the UK EV economy, volume driving growth for all. And a bigger market replacing older ICE vehicles, delivering more than 2 million EVs, could cut 6 million tonnes of CO2. Again, to put that into context, 6 million tonnes of CO2 is a sixth of UK aviation emissions. It's 2.7 billion steaks. That's a hell of a lot of holidays and sun and barbecues. So you can see the prize and the importance of this sector. So we can see the prize, a decarbonised road transport system, a vibrant market, and economic growth, not just for us, but for all of those with a role in this transition. We need to pull together, not pull apart. So support us together to claim that prize, a future in which all of us are already invested. So let's finish the job, the mission we started so long ago. Thank you very much.